Namaste.
Namaskaram. Dr. Suresh Varnapuri, namaste.
Namaste, Andy. Shiva Prasad.
Namaskaram, sir. Namaskaram.
Okay.
Dr. Polisetty, I'm Bernie Colasso, rheumatologist at Central Middlesex, friend of Venkat Joshi.
Very nice to meet you, sir.
And interesting to hear your talk the other day that he sent out.
I'm Shiva Prasad, Kashinadini, CNN News Channel South India Director here.
Yeah.
And Dr. Ravishankar is my closest friend.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Ravishankar garu.
Let me introduce me. I'm Dr. Suresh Varnapuri. I'm President of Europe Ayurveda Academy, France, and Executive Director, Association of Ayurveda Academy, UK. And Dr. Venkat Joshi is the Director of Association of Ayurveda Academy, UK. So we work together, and we are running an academy in Paris since 4 years. Both live and online education we are doing. And now we started in the UK also, along with Dr. Venkat Joshi. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you, sir. Ravishankar garu.
Hello. Hi. I'm here. Thank you very much, Dr. Suresh Varnapuri, for joining. Yeah, I'll maybe mute everyone, or it's okay. Yeah. So welcome everybody. Dr. Joshi garu, good evening. Dr. One second. There are still people coming in, so I'm just admitting them.
Dr. Allopathic, Director, College of Ayurveda.
Okay.
Yes, I'm Allopathic.
Dr. Allopathic, welcome. Thank you very much. Dr. Shanta has joined. Dr. Carlos is here. Dr. Maheshwaram Ramesh is here.
Dr. Kolako.
Dr. Cecile Kolako.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Whoops, I've lost you. That's me. Yeah.
So, Dr. Joshi, can you introduce them because they're all your friends? Yeah, it'll be great to.
Yeah, welcome to you all. And Dr. Kolako is a scientist and rheumatologist in the Middlesex Hospital who is using yoga already as a tool, as an adjuvant protocol for his rheumatoid arthritis patients. Since long time, we had several meetings with Professor Nagendra from Yoga University from Bangalore, and Dr. Allopathic, Director, College of Ayurveda, and as well as President, British Ayurvedic Medical Council. And also Dr. Shanta Godagama is founder for British Ayurvedic Medical Council, and we are all under that big umbrella body. I'm working under Dr. Allopathic, and some of our college students, and as well as my Dr. Raghunandan Sharma is my colleague, and who is working and practicing Ayurveda in Spain, and as well as Dr. Vasanthi. Last time we were there as our senior surgeon, breast cancer, and also studied Ayurveda, and she is also practicing along with us. And as well as Dr. Jyoti Koval is also one of our staff under Dr. Allopathic College. And also we can see some of students who could join, and finally, after completing this post-graduation diploma over here, Dr. Bobby is sitting over there and already had clinical training placements in India. And I hope so others will be joining. So I don't want to waste my precious time, and I would like to give the mic to Dr. Ravishankar Polisetty. Later on they will interact, and then definitely they will introduce themselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Joshi. Welcome everybody. I already met Dr. Suresh Varnapuri and Dr. Allopathic. Dr. Shanta Godaga is here again. Sir, I think you have to turn your phone possibly. It's
whose phone there?
Video, yeah. Now I can see you.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
And,
Nice meeting you.
Dr. Cecil Kolako, nice meeting you. Thank you very much for joining here. And all the students here who have successfully completed, welcome everybody. And I want to introduce Dr. Carlos. Carlos Rizzo, he is a graduate from the Swasa, some time ago. So he is from Italy, and he runs his company in Switzerland. And he's a very good friend of mine. Together, he had been assistant professor of, in various universities in Mexico, in the US, and then he moved to, finally he's in Philippines right now. He's a very good friend of mine and a very ardent supporter of Ayurveda, and a very good friend. So I think Alex Hankey said he's going to join. And also my very good friend from Cambridge, Madan Thangavelu, was also, pinging me that he would join. I didn't know that he was like, I was down, since yesterday, so I could not actually be active on the group. But I'll promise that I'll be very active from now on, from the tomorrow onwards, and I'm just taking rest. So thank you very much, all the peers here, and many of you are elders and have guided possibly many of students like me. I'm a cardiac surgeon, and with immense interest in Ayurveda, took up fundamental research of Ayurveda. So I would present the way I look at Ayurveda based on data. It's not just because I want to look at Ayurveda some way. I'm going to present data-based and data-driven and also evidence-based concepts in Ayurveda, the way I understood. Excuse me. And I have all the peers here to correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. But this is going to be very interesting because I think, I have given an introductory note on the way I look at Poly Scientific Ayurveda, the way I look at the future of Ayurveda in the form of Poly Scientific Ayurveda. So for those who have joined you, I'll just quickly take few minutes to explain what I did and how I view we should work together to take this great science forward. And today I would actually, possibly reflect on immune disorders from fundamental, coming from the fundamental aspects. So let me share my screen and let me know if you're able to see the screen. Pantulu Raghupati Garu is a very good friend and a great supporter of Poly Scientific Ayurveda, is also here. Okay. So friends, let me quickly introduce, my interest in Ayurveda started right in my medical school when I was actually when I was being taught pharmacology. The numerous side effects of pharmaceutical drugs literally scared me. So I started looking, I wanted to look at those, because I was always brought up in the Satya Sai school. I was brought up saying, being taught, Yanna Bharate, Tannona Bharate, whatever doesn't exist in Bharat doesn't exist anywhere outside of Bharat. So that, and then there were interesting studies. There were interesting studies published way back in 1794, as early as 1794. A journal called Gentleman's Magazine has actually published interesting case reports of two case reports of rhinoplasty. See, friends, this is rhinoplasty published in 1794 by Constantine Carpi, a Oxford-based surgeon those days, and he publishes this in the 64th volume and page number 898. He mentions that, a soldier who was stripped off of his nose and ears was actually on him. A Kumar is a potter, actually performed rhinoplasty in India. and it was published in way back in 1974. I mean, 1794, 225 years ago. And then I also read papers from the archives as to how the Indian immunization, the Ayurvedic possible immunization, had actually literally helped Indians from suffering literally any disease. So all these actually archives from Russia and from the library in Russia in Minsk, in a city near to Minsk. That was where I was graduated. Really intrigued me, and I really felt that this was some advanced kind of science that is mentioned. Because I never expected that our people way back in 1794 could perform plastic surgery. And Russian books of medicine, in the history of medicine, they clearly mention that the father of surgery in the modern era comes from India, and his name is Sushruta. And the father of medicine is Charaka, and he comes from India. And then surgery is Sushruta, and he also comes from India. This was mentioned as it was taught regularly in the Russian medical institutions. That really was an eye opener, because I never expected that we had a very advanced very advanced science. So all this intrigued me, and then I started reading Ayurveda. And as I read Ayurveda, I understood that the knowledge of Sanskritam is very, very important, because all the scriptures are written in original Sanskritam. And to just share with you, Sanskritam is a Navavyakarana bhasha. It means it has got 9 grammars. We are right now speaking in English. And in English, if you go to a book called Wren and Martin, that's where we were taught all the basics of English grammar, from this book called Wren and Martin. And that book, if you look at the number of grammar principles, there are just about 900 to 950 grammar principles based on which you speak in that language. And there are several languages. Telugu consists of about 1600 grammar principles, Hindi of about 1700 grammar principles. And the interesting part is that Sanskritam comprises of about more than 200,000 grammar principles, and they are divided into 9 different libraries. That is why it's called as a Nava Vyakaranam Bhasha, the language in which there are 9 libraries of grammar, which are the Indram, the Aindram, Sandram, Shakalam, Shakadainam, Kasapilsram, Kaumarakam, Paniniyam, Saraswatam, and so on and so forth. So there are like 9 different libraries, and Paniniyam is the most grammar, the grammar that is in vogue today, which has about 3,996 grammar principles. So the Mahabhashyam mentions that when you read anything in Sanskritam, you got to apply at least one principle from each of these Sanskrit grammars, each of the 9, so that you, from one syllable or from letter of a word, you end up with 9 meanings. That's how beautifully the ancient scientists, the grammarians, or the ancient scientists have communicated with us. If a word has about 2 syllables, you end up with 9 to the power of 2, which is 81 meanings for a certain word. So they communicated more, speaking less. So this is what I realized as I unraveled as I started unraveling the original form of Sanskrit Bhasha. And so I started applying this language, the principles of this language, and then started reading afresh these original scriptures of Charaka Samhita. I started off with the Sutrasthanam. So to understand Sutrasthanam, I slowly started reading the original, because there are cross citations to Sankhya Darshanam, and from the Sankhya, and also cross citations to the Viveka Chudamani, the Vedanta Panchadashi, and so on and so forth. So it's a very elaborate science, the way our ancestors looked at looked at the metaphysics, or the original science of origin of the Pancha Mahabhutas is really interesting. So, because from there originate the three doshas, and three doshas form the fundamental concepts of Ayurvedic understanding. So I this is how I started. Even before becoming an Ayurvedic scholar, I wouldn't claim myself a scholar, but I'm still learning a lot of things. As I started venturing, understanding Ayurveda, I slowly started learning Sanskritam. So the knowledge of allopathy has definitely, the training is beautiful, in which, the subjects of biochemistry, anatomy, physiology lay a strong foundation on how, on mathematical biology. And as I figured out, it took about 10 years for me to just keep learning this original Sanskritam, the original Ayurvedic scriptures. So what I felt was there was a gap between the Ayurvedic concept and the way we understand medicine, we understand the body. This gap, I felt, there was nothing equivalent to Vata, Pitta, Kapha in the allopathic medicine. And then as I show you in the following slides as to how we tried to decipher what Vata, Pitta, Kapha could mean, number one, and also how they are so relevant, and how mathematically, how the human biology could be mathematically expressed is the way our ancestors looked at. And I'll just show you in the future slide. So to correlate the fundamentals of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, we started creating models of Vata, Pitta, Kapha from the understanding that I had from Ayurveda. And from there, we slowly started applying this knowledge to, treat patients. And as we started unraveling, as we started creating models of Vata, Pitta, Kapha in experimental animals and in vitro cells, we found advanced mathematical biological algorithms. So it made imperative that I essentially master data science. So all this knowledge that I gained over the last 18 years, in the form of experimental Ayurveda, and also in the last 28 years in the form of learning from original scriptures, has led to the origin of this science called Poly Scientific Ayurveda. And I'll show you how we incorporated these rules into a digital technology. And so welcome to Poly Scientific Ayurveda. So friends, I had mentioned this, that, the advantage of scientific Ayurveda, the Ayurveda itself is, it has given a beautiful answer to the question of homeostasis. Homeostasis is known to the modern science too, and in the books of physiology and biochemistry, we were taught that if the body is set into the state of homeostasis, it cures its own self. Well-being is a state of homeostasis. But really speaking, I was mentioning this the day before. I'll just quickly cite the same thing. See, if you look at the American Endocrinologist Association, they set the HbA1c value at 5.5. That is, HbA1c cannot go beyond 5.5. The American Diabetologists Association are slightly liberal. They set the HbA1c at 6.5. American Gerontology Association sets this at between 7 and 8. And American College of Physicians mentions, in the recent study that was conducted in 2018, they reset HbA1c anywhere around 8. And what I'm trying to point out is that all these four powerful associations, which are data-driven and evidence-based, they kind of give different values for glucose homeostasis. So what which reference value are you supposed to actually follow is the biggest question that we as allopathic doctors have across the world, not just in India or in some place. It's all across the world. Similarly, the cholesterol, Liechtenstein, who is the vice chair of the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee of the United States, in her presentation on the 11th of December 2015, explicitly mentions that there is no relation between the blood cholesterol, I mean the serum cholesterol, and heart disease. And she goes on to mention that, in fact, cholesterol is not a matter of concern. These are exact words that when she mentioned, Elise Liechtenstein mentions that cholesterol is not a matter of concern for overconsumption. That's what she says precisely. And and also there is a study called as a Hunt study, in which the Norwegian scientists pulled up data from about 92,000 patients, and they demonstrated how the statins have actually caused new form of heart disease, new form of heart failure in patients aged over 60 with a propensity score of 92%. And also, new forms of liver failure and rhabdomyolysis and also kidney failure were reported in their study. That really, puts us at a loss in terms of, how to treat patients with high levels of cholesterol. What are the interrelations of LDL and HDL and with the total cholesterol is, becomes a problem again. So understanding cholesterol metabolism, I would say, is inconclusive as of now, from the data that is generated. And with the diabetes, again, we have a different altogether problem. But then, I'll come to the solution of the problem towards the end of my lecture. But what I would certainly mention is that this problem is beautifully solved in Ayurveda when the Sushruta Samhita or the Charaka Samhita or Maharshis from various across disciplines have unanimously agreed that Samadosha is the balance or equal proportions of these three doshas called the Vata, Pitta, Kapha in all of the Saptadhatus and 42 organs leads to swasthyam or leads to health. So when you're able to balance the three doshas in equal proportion in each of the 7 tissues and 42 organs, the body sets into a self-healing mode and cures itself, is what this beautiful slokam mentions. Samadoshaha samagnischa samadhatu malakriya prasannatma manasendriyanu swasthetya vidiyate. So there are again different thoughts on homeostasis. That's on what is samadosha is again, there are various thoughts. I would want to throw up this to the beautiful gathering here towards the end of this, so that we arrive at what is samadosha, or we at least contemplate on what the rishis meant by samadosha. But here I would definitely want to give you my, after reviewing a lot of papers and also from correlating from the Viveka Chudamani and the Vedanta Panchadashi, the Samadosha is a state when we have the Vata, Pitta, Kapha in equal proportion in all of the 7 tissues and 42 organs. So there are certain mathematical equations that I usually use from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras and also from the Viveka Chudamani and the Vedanta Panchadashi. So I'll leave that topic. I'll not start the topic now, but I would want to show you how we correlated Vata, Pitta, Kaphas with certain parameters that are quantifiable. So what the rishis are saying from what we gathered is that when these three agents are in equal proportion in each of the 7 tissues and 42 organs, physical health, emotional health, social health, mental health, and spiritual health automatically get restored. And then the actual question started here when I started reading the properties of Vata, Pitta, Kapha as enumerated in any of the Sutrasthanas, be it the Vagbhata Sashtanga Hridaya or the Charaka Samhita Sutrasthana or the Sushruta Samhita Sutrasthanas. What I wanted to point out is that Vata is actually Vata has about 7 properties. Pitta is characterized by about another 7, and Kapha characterized by another 7 properties. You know, all of us know these properties, so I don't want to enumerate those properties. But then, for me, the question was, as a biochemical, I'm a student of biochemistry, the question that came to me was that it's like, did the ancient scientists know about biochemistry? You know, because in biochemistry, we were really taught that there are more than 7 million chemicals in the human body. And in the human body. And the ancient books mention just about these 21 properties that characterize Vata, Pitta, Kapha. That was my question. Until I stumbled upon a beautiful shloka from the Padma Purana with a cross citation from Rasendra Sara Sangraha. So the Padma Purana or the Rasendra Sara, and even the Rasendra Sara Sangraha mention about Ashitish Chatva Laksha Rasamrutam Swastya Ityavidhite. That's what the Rasendra Sara Sangraha mentions. What it means is the body is composed of 84 lakh chemicals. Nectarine chemicals is the word that they use, Rasa Amrutam. And they maintain your health. And it doesn't stop here. They further mention that out of these 84 lakh chemicals, Jalaja, which means water soluble, are 9 lakh chemicals. Jalaja Navalakshani, Sthavara, which means those chemicals that don't react with anything, that are non-reactive, are Vimshati Lakshani, 20 lakh chemicals, or 2 million. And Grita Chaturasya Lakshani, what the rishis mention here is 4 lakh chemicals or 400,000 chemicals are actually fat soluble, and so on and so forth. An entire solubility profile is given in the next 7 verses. I mean, I just mentioned 3 just so that, you know, we know that most of the chemicals are already categorized based on the solubility profile by these ancient rishis already. And not only that, they mention that 8.4 million chemicals actually result in production of, in generating about 32 trillion chemical interactions. So the word that was used here is Rasayana Karshaha. And Kasakrishna grammar, and again, you know, the most of these Rasayana books in the ancient, in Rasavadam including, mention there are 2 kinds of interaction, Rasayana Charya and Rasayana Karsha. Rasayana Charya is a chemical reaction, Rasayana Karsha means a chemical interaction. So chemical interactions also would include interactions within a certain atom, because within the atom there are various, you know, van der Waals forces of attraction, there are short range forces, there are various electrostatic forces of attraction. All these also were taken into consideration when they were actually documenting these books. And the more than 270,000 actually verses, then 270,000 verses that explicitly explain chemistry or the biochemistry. So the 8.4 million chemicals result in, you know, 32 trillion interactions, and there again the data scientists of those times, the physicians of those times, they essentially possibly applied an advanced form of data science to categorize these 32 trillion interactions into 21 broad categories based on certain common properties. And the ancient science clearly mentioned that 7 of these categories guide about 11 trillion interactions, and they all guide the molecular pathways, and 7 of them guide the metabolic pathways. The rest of the 7 that guide 10 trillion interactions guide assimilative pathways. And biochemically, this is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So the rishis are mentioning that, you know, they're suggesting, not just suggesting, the books are suggesting that the rishis have given us a very, very advanced form of mathematical biochemistry. You know, when you apply Vata, Pitta, Kapha and read the Vata, Pitta, Kapha along with the Rasa Shastras, you end up with understanding that the fundamental way the rishis understood the body is very, very advanced. They not only, you know, just to let you know that we know in today's world, we know the solubility profile of only 900,000 chemicals in the modern biochemistry. And moreover, we are yet to know 1.4 million more chemicals that are already described in the ancient Ayurvedic Rasa Shastram, number one. And there are 10 new biochemicals that are being discovered every day. So this way, we are going to discover the rest of the 1.4 million chemicals as suggested in these ancient books in the next 270 years, friends. So what I'm saying is, this is a very, very advanced form of biochemistry presented to us. And not only did they explain biochemistry this way, but they also beautifully explained, from my understanding, Vata, Pitta, Kapha was used. I mean, this constructs were used in understanding or helping us understand physiological processes, immunological processes, biochemical processes, and they gave they even analyzed the foods based on their Vata, Pitta, Kapha predominance. And what the ancient science again further mentions in the Yoga Ratnakaram or Bhaishya Ratnavali is that there's a technique called the Naadi Pareeksha. Of course, there are Ashtavidha techniques. There are 8 methods of examination. But Naadi Pareeksha is really interesting, in actually diagnosing, the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, proportions of Vata, Pitta, Kapha in individual organs. And using this technique, you kind of detect the imbalances present in each of the 7 tissues and 42 organs, and and analyze these, from the ancient science. What I figured out, what they use the time domains, the frequency domains, and also the mind domains. When I read these books, it's interesting to note that in the Yoga Ratnakaram, Maharshi mentions that he applied. I don't want to repeat that because most of you must have known it. So I'll leave it here. But then in today's world, the pressure pulse is actually characterized by about 6 or 7 parameters. Like when you characterize a wave, you know that there is an amplitude, there's a velocity, wavelength, frequency, time period, and things so on and so forth, and also certain frequency domains. But the ancient science gives about 24 characteristics of pulse pressure wave, and all of these are quantifiable and beautifully explained in the ancient book. Details of which will be very, very too advanced math for us. So I'll just leave it here. Just suffice to know that there is a beautiful concept of categorizing all the physiological, metabolical, immunological, neurological pathways in the body, and they classified them into Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And when the impact of Vata and the impact of Pitta and impact of Kapha is equally is in equal proportion in each of the 7 tissues and 42 organs, the body automatically cures. And there's a method already explained to detect these VPKs or Vata, Pitta, Kaphas in different organs. And by detecting these imbalances, the ancient science helps. They also came up with an entire fingerprint of Vata, Pitta, Kaphas of individual foods that are available. Every action that you do, every thought that happens in our minds are all categorized into Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So from theoretically, what I figured out was Ayurveda is a beautiful science in which, one, you know what is homeostasis, and once you know the Vata, Pitta, Kapha fingerprint of an individual in all of the 42 organs, what you have to do is you have to map, you have to give those specific foods and those specific pranayamas and yogic asanas and other exercises. Anyone who's interested in, say, fitness regimen could also be categorized, could also be personalized. And there's a method of personalization, not just of the foods and exercises or yogic and pranayamic exercises, but also of the herbs. So you've got various extraction forms of the herbs, ranging from Kwatam, Ghritam, Asavam, Arishtam, various forms, because each of these forms are very, very important. Say, for example, if someone's heart is vitiated, say, by Vata, then you give a Arjuna Ghritam or a Arjuna Kwatam. If the same heart is again vitiated by, say, Pitta, you give a Arjuna in the form of an Asavam. So you got specific mapping of the way the formulation of each of these herbs and they're mapped to the proportions of Vata, Pitta, Kapha in individual organs. That's why you have about more than 16 different types of formulations for each of the herbs present in, are explained in Ayurveda. This is quickly my understanding on Ayurveda, so theoretical understanding. So now let's, this is a great science. Number one, it has given me a beautiful insight into how to understand homeostasis, how to restore homeostasis, number one. And number two, how to treat patients. But then the problem here was how to quantify Vata, Pitta, Kapha, how to explain Vata, Pitta, Kapha in the language of the current science. I try to do this because Sushruta Samhita mentions again, whenever there is a new science, you translate the science, this Ayurvedic science, into the language of that new science, and then spread it to people, is what Sushruta Maharshi in the Sutrasthana mentions beautifully. So taking that as a cue, we took the liberty of actually creating models of Vata, Pitta, Kapha in experimental animals. So we used foods to create the impact of Vata, to create the effect of Vata in experimental groups of animals. We used Vata aggravating, Vata, Pitta enhancing, and Kapha enhancing diets, and gave them to 3 different groups of viscous trained rats for about a month. And after a month, we isolated the hearts of the rats because what we wanted to investigate was, would we be having, would the heart be beating differently, or would it be beating the same way is in different groups, is what we wanted to investigate. So what we did was we isolated the hearts based on the Langendorf method, as explained in the modern physiological methods. And these are the foods that we gave, and and then what we did after 1 month, we injected a dye called as a voltage active dye into the hearts, with the help of which the spectrum that is radiated from the hearts was actually captured in an optic mapping system to actually reproduce the action potentials. So this is an optic mapping system that we use to actually capture the action potentials. And we also use glass electrodes. Simple glass electrodes could be used by anyone who has access to glass electrodes. It can be done in any lab, any small biological, a lab which has a animal facility, and of course with the approval of the ethical committee. So what we registered was the action potential. So just to refresh our memories, on action potential, see, every external stimulus that our body receives through the 5 sense organs gets actually translated into an electrochemical message. And this electrochemical message has a certain pattern. It is called as an action potential. And this action potential goes all the way from the receptor to the brain. The brain then analyzes this information and then produces a decision, and then decision again is in the form of an action potential. It is again an electrical activity. So there is a certain pattern in which these action potentials are generated. There's something called the resting membrane potential, at which the cells rest. And when an external stimulus is incident at this point, the slow sodium ions open up, and hence you see this graph slowly moving here. And when until it reaches a certain threshold, which is called as a threshold membrane potential, at the moment the threshold membrane potential is reached with the inflow of sodium ions into the cell, the fast sodium channels open up, and there's a sudden spike of sodium influx into the, caused by sodium influx into the cell, until it reaches plus 35 in the transmembrane potential. And at this point, chloride starts moving into the cell, and at this point potassium starts moving outside the cell. At the end of this action potential, once the potassium starts moving, the transmembrane potential again goes back to negativity to around minus 120. And then towards the end of this action potential, the sodium ions are effluxed, which are sent out, which means they're sent out from the cell to the extracellular fluid, and from the extracellular fluid, the potassium ions are influxed again through an energy-based mechanism. There's a sodium-potassium ATPase that catalyzes ATP, and then the sodium-potassium channel actually enables the movement of sodium and potassium, outward and inward respectively. So this is just for us to quickly have a recap of action potentials. Why is this important? Is because what we recorded was very, very interesting. That the resting membrane potential, this is already published. I can share, you can just search this and you'll find effects of diets there's a citation, there's a citation of this the paper. So what we recorded was, okay, the control group of rats were fed on balanced diet. Okay, so the threshold membrane potential across all the groups was -65, which means this didn't change. This one didn't change. But what definitely, excuse me, what definitely changed was the resting membrane potential. In Vata enhanced diet fed rats, the resting membrane potential was -72. In Pitta, it was around -90. And in Kapha, it was around -108. So the resting membrane potential in Vata, Pitta, Kapha, as you see, was around -72, -90, -108. And then let me elaborate here. What it means is that the difference between the resting and the threshold membrane potentials in Vata is only 7 millivolts. In Pitta, it was 25 millivolts. And in Kapha, it was 43 millivolts. Why is this so important is that, why is this important is because Vata systems require very less external stimulus. Even an external stimulus of a small sound, say for example, or a small, if it is in respect to the auditory receptors, a small sound is enough for the Vata media or Vata aggravated ears to elicit an action potential, and it gets transmitted to the brain. The Pitta action potential, the Pitta would require 25 millivolts. That's like about little over 3 times more than the Vata, and then the Kapha is around 43. So if you say supply an external, stimulus of 53 millivolts equivalent external stimulus, Vata systems would produce 7 action potentials. Pitta systems would produce 2 action potentials, and Kapha only 1. This is very, very interesting. Why? Because and then also please note that the Pitta systems are pretty much equivalent to the control group of rats which were fed on balanced diet. Which means the Pitta systems were producing literally equal amounts of action potentials. And initially, we thought that these Pitta systems are pretty much the normal control group systems, are systems that would actually function as a normal cell. But in the future, in the next slide, I'll just show you, it's not completely like that. But this is very important for my, at that time, it was very important for my understanding, because way back in 2002, what we were able to show was that whatever was written, the Vata in the ancient text was characterized as a chalat, was given a property called the chalatva, is attributed by a property called chalatva. And chalatva means not just mobile, but also hyperexcitable. There is applying the Kasakrutsna grammar, you could deduce that Vata has a chalatva property, and it is for the first time proved, in the modern era. Why is it attributed by a chalatva property? Is because the resting membrane at a cellular level, at an electrophysiological level, Vata systems, Vata cells would have resting membrane potential very close to the threshold membrane, and they make the system hyperexcitable. The Kapha systems require a larger external stimulus, and hence they're very stable, and hence the word sthira was used. So encouraged by these results, by repeated results, we repeated these experiments many times, and then we got similar results. So what we also wanted to understand was, how do the Vata, Pitta, Kapha systems perform under the influence of acetylcholine and adrenaline, because these are mediators or hormones that regulate the parasympathetic and the sympathetic systems. So what we found was the Vata systems were insignificantly reacting to acetylcholine and also adrenaline. The Pitta systems had the Vata systems had high impact of the, there are three actually here, three bars here, which show that under the influence of acetylcholine, the Vata systems reduce their action potential by at least 50%. So acetylcholine was impacting the Vata systems by reducing their the length of the action potential and also the rate at which the action potential was produced. In the Pitta, it was the least. Neither the adrenaline nor the acetylcholine were actually producing any effect in changing either the length of the action potential or the frequency at which the action potentials were generated. So in Kapha, the adrenaline were able to produce more, while the acetylcholine, more action potentials, while acetylcholine could not reduce much. This is very interesting. Why? Because Vata systems are hyperreactive, number one, and then we mentioned when we were doing a quick recap of action potentials, the Vata systems are actually using up ATP faster because they're reacting fast. They're producing more action potential for the same external stimulus. So they are using up ATP faster than the other systems. So they are hyperreactive systems, and then they get ATP depleted very, very fast. Number two, the Pitta systems, what we found was the Pitta systems were really interesting in the sense that they were producing appropriate amount of action potentials, which were like comparable to the control group of rats. But the key here, the interesting part here is that they were not responding either to acetylcholine or adrenaline, either acetylcholine or adrenaline were not actually influencing the action potentials of the Pitta. And we were really, it is a really interesting state. Why? Because it is only through the, Mr. Brijla raised his hand, and I would take the questions at the end, please. Okay. So why is it so important is because the, so how is that the Pitta systems are actually responding to the external stimulus? So what we found was there is elevated amount of alpha ketogluteric acid in the cytoplasms of Pitta systems, and this has actually helped actually produce as many action potentials as is required, and then Pitta systems appropriately respond to the external stimulus. That is how Pitta systems are regulated. So, and alpha ketogluteric acid is a mediator, is one of the active metabolites of mitochondrial pathways, and we were proposing at that time that Pitta could be, mitochondria could be the seat of the Pittas. Sorry. So now come the Kapha systems. The Kapha systems, as I already demonstrated, was they were producing less number of action potentials, and also the resting membrane, the threshold membrane were wide apart, and that's why the systems were categorized by Sthira and Sandra properties. And electrophysiologically, this system should be categorized as hyporeactive electrophysiological environments. So this is one of the lessons that we learned, very interesting lessons, which I show how they were very, very interesting, or they are useful in understanding the immune system. Because today is immune boosting is very widely used, and what is immune boosting and what is not, and how to actually boost the immune system, or is immune boosting required for everyone, or what is immune boosting scientifically is, from the view of Poly Scientific Ayurveda, is what I would want to present in the next part of the lecture. But at this stage, I would want to definitely bring your attention to the fact that we created these models of Vata, Pitta, Kapha in various experimental animal models, and also in vitro cells, in the PMC, peripheral monocyte cells, and also in the THP cells. And what we figured out was what we were able to actually correlate to more than 3,000 markers, the both biochemical, interleukin, and cytokine markers, and a certain VPK quantification could be achieved through these markers. And also these are markers from heart rate variability again. And we tested in experimental post-MI scenarios, in experimental models of animal models of post-MI, we were able to demonstrate complete regeneration, of the heart tissues after an MI was experimentally induced in the Vista strain rats. This was published. I mean, patents were filed across the world, in the UK and in US and Canada and in India, because we were able to demonstrate that if you are able to actually understand or quantify the VPK imbalances in organs, and in respect to heart attacks, I mean ischemic, I mean MIs, myocardial infarctions, we were able to quantify the Samanavata, Sadhaka Pitta, and the Avalambaka Kapha, and when we were able to bring about a certain balance using a certain blend of herbs and minerals, we were able to demonstrate complete regeneration of the heart in post-MI scenario within the first 2 weeks. The only condition is that the patient should be, the animal should be subjected to this particular VPK balancing technique within the first 5 days. There's a reason for that. We'll not go deep into that. That's a part of my the Poly Scientific Ayurvedic lectures, which we are proposing very soon to bring it to to give another view of Ayurveda to people across, both scientists and Ayurvedic practitioners, and also allopathic physicians. So friends, I wanted to quickly,